Microphone on, camera full, microphone plugged in. Hey.
Okay, sounds good. This is all set up for us.
Oh, do you need a notebook? I don't see him. Oh, I see him. Okay.
Crazy people at work. No, go back in. No, let's get back in.
He was arrested. I think we're going to be one of the ones.
And he wanted to get arrested on television. He wanted to cooperate with that. So they just did. One officer's carrying the
I think we're going to be on your uniform. I think we can repeat the whole squad. Oh. We saw him out front and
Yeah, the police kept talking to him. It was only a matter of time.
gotta love Erie.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Beto. Happy birthday to you.
See, Congressman, I told you they loved you in Erie. Good afternoon, Erie. strong showing for Beto O'Rourke. It's pretty rare that I stay out of primaries, but when you have a candidate who has this much character, integrity, passion, and who's willing to make a difference and has proven he can make the difference, you got to throw your support behind the right horse. I think when you look at all the candidates collectively and you look at what they stand for, you might not agree with them on individual policies, but if you look at everything, their policy platforms, this guy's it right here. He knows how to get our economy moving, and he knows how to take care of the environment, and he's got a great plan for immigration. This is our guy here, Erie. As a policymaker, and on the political side of things, given that the Pennsylvania House of Representatives is 9 away from being in the majority and 3 away from being in the majority in the Senate, I need somebody at the top of the ticket who can help us win up and down the ballot and get Democrats out the vote. And this is this guy, Beto O'Rourke. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my friend, Beto O'Rourke. Beto, thanks for coming.
How's everybody doing? Thank you all, each of you, for being here today. Although we don't want to assume anything, many of you may have just been innocently drinking beer on a Thursday afternoon when a presidential candidate walked in. But whatever brought you out here, I'm glad I get the chance to meet you and to be with you and also to listen to you. I'm going to introduce myself, and then we're going to turn the microphone over to you, bring as many people into the conversation as possible. I have no hope of reflecting the genius of Erie, of being able to serve this community as president if I haven't first been here and had the chance to listen to the people of this community. And, importantly, to try the IPA that they make right here. I want to make sure that we know what's going on, and we judge a community by the beer that it produces. And so, we're looking forward to that. Literally, the day that I got into this race, all the way back in March, which seems like years ago, Representative Bizzarro reached out to me. And he said, look, you don't know me, we've never met, we really don't have any other connections except that I really think you need to come to Erie if you're serious about the future of this country. This community holds so many of the answers to the open questions in America right now. No one's working harder on these issues than you are and your representative, Ryan Bizzarro. So when we were talking today, we talked about ensuring that we have jobs that pay well, that have high value, that provide dignity to those who want to work them, and ensure that they don't have to work a second or a third job that make ends meet. We're going to make sure that there's a minimum wage that everyone can live on in this country. We're going to make sure that we attract the employers right here to Erie, Pennsylvania, who will provide those jobs so that young people, right now, in too many cases, who have moved to other communities in Pennsylvania or in America or across the planet, come back home to Erie to be with their families, to raise their families, to enrich this community and ensure the rest of the country knows how special Erie, Pennsylvania is. That's right. We talked about education, making sure that we have world-class public schools, getting behind the public school educators who work their hearts out every single day for every single child in front of them, making sure that they're paid to measure it with the value that they provide in that classroom, acknowledge the sacrifices that they've made, not only the schooling, the learning, but the debt that they took on to make sure that they could have the privilege of teaching our kids in the classroom, a classroom where too many fear right now, and for good cause, that someone will walk in with a firearm for which they did not have to pass a background check, for which there is no red flag law, for which there is no protection against those who would purchase AR-15s and AK-47s, weapons designed for use on a battlefield, because they are devastatingly effective at killing people efficiently, effectively, in as great a number as possible. We witnessed that in El Paso, Texas on August 3rd of this year. In under 3 minutes, 22 people were gunned down in a Walmart the Saturday before school started that next Monday. Dozens more grievously injured. A man armed not just with a weapon of war, but armed with hatred and intolerance and a racism that has long defined this country but has been brought out into the open by our current president, who warns of immigrants coming to get us, of asylum seekers who are predators and animals, who puts children in cages, and has lost the lives of 7 children in our custody and in our care just this year. I want to make sure that no teacher, no child in her classroom ever has to fear for their lives, or has come to the conclusion that it's not a matter of if, but when that is going to happen to them as well. I want to make sure that we back those teachers in every single way possible. Clear their student loan debt, pay them a true wage for what they've done, and then protect them in the classrooms. Are you there with me? All public school teacher? Let's do that. So impressed with what Representative Pizarro has done in standing up for veterans. Every woman, every man who's put their life on the line for this country, who served all the way back in World War II, Korea, those who came back from Vietnam, sent off to a war that this country did not understand, provided service that they were never really congratulated or thanked for, but got back to work here in Erie or in my hometown of El Paso, Texas, raised their families, made their communities and this country great by extension, and right now, perhaps at a crossroads 50 years after their service, dealing with a post-traumatic stress disorder or the consequences of a traumatic brain injury that they never really acknowledged before and now need help. Ryan making sure that every single one of those veterans has access to a VA to get the care that they need to be well, to get back on their feet, and to address an epidemic of suicide amongst veterans in this country, more than 22 a day, every single day. Let us spare no expense, move every mountain, do whatever it takes to deliver for those veterans who delivered for us. Like Erie, perhaps, in El Paso, Texas, the city that I'm from, where I was raised, where Amy, my wife, and I are raising our 3 kids, Ulysses, who's in 7th grade, Molly, who's in 6th, Henry, who is in 3rd, where they're going to dual language schools, learning their math in English today, learning their math in Spanish tomorrow, making the most of a binational community that is connected to Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. 3 million of us from 2 countries, speaking 2 languages, 2 cultures, 2 histories, joined to form one people, far greater, far bigger, far more powerful than the sum of their parts or the number of people involved. It is a magical place, just like Erie is a magical place. You all are a port of entry here. We're a land port of entry down there. We are the crossroads for so much of the Americas, and I'm so proud of that community, so lucky to be there, so grateful to share with you that we are one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because we're a city of immigrants, and the sons and daughters of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the world over, who have found a home in our community and made it better by their very presence. What if, as Democrats, as Republicans, as independents, as Americans first before we were anything else, we rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, in the image of Erie, in the image of El Paso, in the image of America. Free every single dreamer from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens in this, their true home country. Give people a legal, safe, quick, and orderly path to come to this country, to join family, or to work a job, or to go to school, or to renew and refresh this idea of America. That we are a people defined not by race, nor by religion, nor ethnicity, nor common genealogy, but instead by this idea that we are all created equal, to equal opportunity. Though we've never quite achieved this, we've never stopped working towards it, perhaps until this moment. A moment where you have a president who would define us along lines of religion or race or ethnicity, who warns about Muslims being inherently dangerous or defective and has proposed to keep them all out of this country. In fact, the day that he signed the Muslim ban in 2017, the mosque in Victoria, Texas, in my home state, was burned to the ground. Hate crimes on the rise every single one of the last 3 years. Asking women of color duly elected to represent their constituents in Congress to go back to their home country, that signal is not lost on the rest of America. Calling Klansmen and neo-Nazis very fine people after they marched and chanted, "Jews, you will not replace us." The rhetoric does not just offend our sensibilities, it is changing this country and is putting in peril the lives of our fellow Americans. And in addition, y además, right now, we have the mother of all constitutional tests for this country. A president who has invited the involvement of a foreign power in our elections, not once, as he did in 2016 and then tried to cover up for it every year thereafter, but in this very year, 2019, asking the president of Ukraine to dig up dirt on a potential political rival to advance his own political career. Now, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, whether you voted for Trump or you voted for Hillary Clinton or you couldn't stomach either of them and you didn't vote at all, you understand that this democracy, our country, is on the line at this moment. If we set the precedent that some people are above the law because of the position of power or public trust that they hold, we will lose this country and this democracy forever. There must be consequences, there must be accountability, and there must be justice. So, how are we going to make sure that the communities of El Paso and Erie and those all across the United States in points in between can rise to their full potential and fulfill their promise, and by extension help this country to fulfill its promise as well? Let's make sure that we're focusing on one another, listening to one another, as Ryan asked me to listen to him when I started this race and invited me to Erie and what has brought me here today. Let's make sure that we're investing in the well-being of our fellow Americans. In my home state of Texas, the largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system, so that you have people with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, getting arrested on purpose to be taken to the one place where they're guaranteed care, a roof over their head, clothes on their back, a prescription to a psychotropic medication that temporarily makes life bearable for them. What if they didn't have to worry about that because we as Americans decided that we were going to focus on universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care in this country? Mental health care, primary health care, prescription medication health care, every woman making her own decisions about her own body. We can do this in this country. We just have to decide we're going to do this in this country. What if for those who want to go to college at a time that there's $1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt, we ensure that if you're holding some of that debt and you commit yourself to public service, working in the VA, where we have 40,000 unfilled clinical positions right now, working in a public school where we have a teacher shortage throughout much of the country, working in any level of public service, state, local, county, federal government, what if we say, if you do that, we will wipe clean and clear your student loan debt so you do not have to worry about it going forward? If you're about to go to college, we'll make sure the first 2 years are free, that 4 years are debt-free, not just for tuition, but room and board and books. And that we follow the lead of this community. Some of the concerns and opportunities that you've raised with me just on my visit today, and we invest in a community college right here in Erie, Pennsylvania. So anybody who wants to better themselves can do so at no cost to themselves or their families. But we do not do this at the expense of those who do not want to go to college. We elevate the role of unions, create 5 million new apprenticeships in this country to learn a skill or a trade. We were just at Don John right now, and they were talking about the number of jobs that are connected to Don John and the dry dock here in this community, but they also talked about the number of jobs outside of this community, contractors and small businesses that are brought to Erie, Pennsylvania to do some of the work here. What if we could grow more of our own or return more of our own, make sure that capital is available to entrepreneurs and small business owners? They can brew more beer. They can train more welders. They can bring more young people back to this community. Unions, Higher education, economic opportunity is at the core of this, and that is the first thing that Representative Bizzarro asked me to focus on. He said, Beto, it is all about jobs. Jobs with pay, jobs with dignity, jobs that allow people to live in the community in which they were raised. That's what we're going to focus on here in Erie, Pennsylvania. Then there's this. The fact that another point of pride for this community is the fact that so many people come from so many other parts of the country and Canada and the world to see the lake here, to be on the shore, to enjoy one another's company, to see what is so beautiful and hidden for me in El Paso. Never heard about what was going on here. But if the climate continues to change, if this planet continues to cook, if we have another 1.5 degrees Celsius of warming over pre-industrial revolution levels, the 3 feet of lake rise that you've seen in Erie so far, the algae blooms that make this water dangerous when they appear and diminish our ability to access the largest source of fresh water on planet Earth, and to attract those tourists to this community, all of that is undermined and compromised. So, the scientists tell us that the floods, the droughts, the storms, the fires that we're seeing throughout so much of this country and the world are caused not by God or by Mother Nature, but by all of us, our emissions, our excesses, our inaction in the face of the facts and the truth and the science. We have 10 years to get this right or avert a catastrophe that will make these disasters pale by comparison. And in those 10 years, we must free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, embrace wind, like the offshore wind that we want to see here, solar, renewable energy technologies, and the high-value, high-wage, high-skilled jobs that come with them. Ensure that rural communities and farmers are paid to do their part as well, planting cover crops that pull more carbon out of the air, and using no-till and precision-till farming to sequester it, more of it in the soil. In other words, no half steps, no half measures, no half the country. All of us in common cause together for America, for every generation that follows us, doing what we can while we still have time. It is the only way that I know of that I can look my kids in the eye, because it is their judgment that I fear more than anything else in my future. So, while we have time, let's do this. Let's make sure that we confront climate change and make the United States of America the leader in the globe on this issue. And then lastly, I really want to make sure that everyone is able to fully participate in this country's success. And though we wrote those words on the 4th of July, maybe a day or two earlier, 1776, about all being created equal, and though we've strived to live up to that and yet never have, it's never been more of an open question than it is at this moment. When women are making a fraction of what a man makes, still in the year 2019, African American women making 61 cents on the dollar for what a white man makes, Latinas 53 cents on the dollar. And this economy is not serving everyone, is not reflecting the power and value of everyone. What if, in addition to trying to end discrimination in the workplace, we ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, so there's no question constitutionally that women deserve equal treatment in this country, every bit as much as every man in this country? What if we acknowledge that who you love should have no bearing on your ability to be successful in this country? I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but in my home state of Texas, it is still legal, though it's not okay, to fire someone because of their sexual orientation, or refuse to hire someone because of their sexual orientation. To have 30,000 kids recently in Child Protective Services custody, in foster care, and to have an agency so under-resourced that kids were literally sleeping in the CPS offices, under the desks, on top of the desks, and yet by law in Texas you can be too gay to adopt one of those kids into your home. As president, I'm going to sign the Equality Act into law to make sure that the full civil rights of every single American are protected. And then, we were talking about an economy that is working too well for far too few, not well enough for far too many. Part of that dynamic is defined by race in America. There's 10 times the wealth right now in white America than there is in black America. Not by accident, by design. Some would say, Beto, it's not the 4th of July, 1776, from which you should start. It is August 20th, 1619, the first time an African American was brought here against their will to begin building the success and the wealth and the greatness of this country. Their descendants locked out any ability to fully participate in that success. In a kindergarten classroom in some parts of this country, an African American child is 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled as a white child in the same class for the same infraction in front of the same teacher. A schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline that begins, not as I assumed in high school, but when a child is 4 or 5 years old. You saw the 6-year-old recently in the news, African American girl who was cuffed and taken into custody and down to jail for throwing a tantrum in the classroom. Again, that is not the exception. That is the rule, and we understand that in this country. 3 times the mortality risk for women of color as white women in this country right now. So every single dynamic that you can think of is different for our fellow Americans based on the color of their skin. And then there's this, 2.3 million of our fellow Americans are behind bars right now. As we enjoy our freedom, one another's company, and that IPA that someone is going to bring me at some point during this conversation, they are locked up, deprived of their freedom, of their liberty, of every opportunity to be with their families, to work a job, to start a small business, to create music, to do whatever they were placed on this planet to perform in the first place. And that prison population, the largest on planet Earth, is disproportionately comprised of people of color. People who are behind bars for possession of marijuana, a substance that is legal in more than half the states of this country. They're rotting behind bars while executives at Purdue Pharma and Johnson & Johnson, which sold opioids to hundreds of thousands of people in this country, and an opioid overdose, death, crisis, and epidemic, have not spent a single minute behind bars. So a lot of things that we got to do to make this right, from getting more capital out to communities of color. Women of color are starting small businesses at 14 times the rate as a general population. Imagine if they had the capital with which to work. To make sure that we reform our criminal justice system to end the prohibition of marijuana. To make sure that we expunge the arrests of everyone who's been arrested for marijuana in the first place. And then to make sure we tell the full and complete story of this country, going all the way back to 1619. I think it's only then that white America and black America and Americans from every single part of the planet who call this country home now can understand how we got to this place, to ensure that we repair the damage done and stop visiting these kinds of injustices on future generations. And if we are not compelled by the moral dynamic of this, and I am, and maybe you are as well, then we must see this in our own self-interest. The only way we're going to be firing on all cylinders is if every single American is able to participate in this economy, in civic life, in our democracy, and in the future of America. That's why I'm running, and this is the way that I'm running. Going everywhere, including El Paso and Erie, Pennsylvania, bringing in everyone. No me importa, I do not care if you're a Republican. If you are and you're here, you're in the right place. If you're a Democrat and you're here, you're in the right place. Independents, we welcome you as well. All of us together, before we are anything else, defining ourselves as Americans first. That's how we're going to do it. Thank you, Erie, for having us out here today. Very grateful for the chance to have met you, to be with your wonderful state rep, to drink your beer. I was just asked to come back. I will come back. I tried the beer. I can attest to the rest of the country. You need to come to Erie. All right? All right, Cynthia Cano has a microphone. She will bring it to you. Raise your hand and she'll walk it over. We'll get as many people in the conversation as we can. Okay, here we go.
Beto, I am a 30-plus year registered nurse. The healthcare system is broken. Medicare for all will not fix what is wrong with the healthcare system. I've talked to so many people in this room that have no idea how to differentiate
Thank you for the question. So there are two choices that many of us understand when it comes to the future of healthcare in this country, at least represented by candidates who seek the nomination from the Democratic Party. The first is universal health care through a Medicare for All model, which says that everyone who is uninsured gets to enroll in Medicare, and everyone who's insured through a private payer, more than 150 million, will have to leave their insurance and move over to Medicare. It's an all or nothing gambit. There are others, Joe Biden perhaps most famously among them, who say that we'll just improve the Affordable Care Act at the margins. We'll include a public option. You're welcome to buy into insurance if that's what you really want to do. Most estimates show millions of our fellow Americans will remain uninsured, meaning that when they ask for care or need it, it'll be delivered in the emergency room or the county jail, or they will self-medicate on the streets, as so many are doing right now. I say that those two choices present a false choice. There is a better path forward, and we call it Medicare for America. That says that if you're uninsured, we'll enroll you in Medicare. If you are insufficiently insured, meaning you can't afford that copay or your premiums or bridge the deductible, you can elect to move into Medicare. But if you have employer-sponsored insurance, if you're a member of a union who fought for that health care plan and it works for you and your family and you want to keep it, we ensure that you're able to do that. In that way, we preserve choice, we respect the judgments and decisions that you have made, but we guarantee that every single American can see a provider, afford their prescription, take their child to a therapist. Every person can make their own decisions about their own bodies. Medicare for America is the best path for this country. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Thank you.
We're going to go to behind you.
Thank you.
I'm real concerned about everything that you talk about. My biggest concern is watching those children in those cages and the ones that have died. I want to know if you're left in the first 100 beds. Would that be one of your primary care concerns?
Yes. So day one.
Out of there?
Yes, day one, any kid who is currently caged, we're going to make sure that we connect them with their families. Any child who's been separated from their parents, and we actually don't know the number now because the administration has not been forthcoming with the American people, but we know it is thousands. We move whatever it takes, pay any price, bear any burden, get them connected with their families because, as you probably know, we are doing long-lasting damage to these kids. It is tantamount to torture. Imagine if you had just traveled 2,000 miles and you were traveling those 2,000 miles because you had no choice. If you were to stay in Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, you may lose your lives. No parent makes that journey with an 8-year-old child, a 3-year-old child, a 3-month child, unless that's the only thing they can do. They don't do it for kicks. They don't do it to come here and steal your job. They do it because they have nowhere else to go. And we finally got here to a country that has distinguished itself with the Statue of Liberty and the fact that we're a country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refuge, and just at the point that you thought you had found shelter or safety for that child, she is taken from your arms by force. You are deported back to the very country from which you fled in the first place. And that child, a stranger in a strange land who does not speak the language, does not know the laws or customs, has no friends or family or network, is sleeping on a concrete floor under a tinfoil mylar blanket in a border patrol station with the air conditioner jacked. We have lost the lives of 7 children under those conditions in our care in the wealthiest, the most powerful country on the face of the planet. That is how we are treating the most vulnerable among us. And I have been there in El Paso and watched kids who have not seen their parents in months be reunited. And instead of the tears of joy that you might expect to see rolling down their cheeks, instead of the big goofy smile that my 8-year-old Henry greets me with when I've been on the road, there is nothing at all on that kid's face. No longer able to connect with the person with whom they associate the greatest pain that a child can ever face. The fact that they felt that they were abandoned, that their parent did this to them. And I'm no psychologist, but I'm assuming that their heart, that their mind will not open up again to their mom, to their dad, maybe to anyone, unless they get some serious help and attention and care. So let us not prolong this torture and this devastation that we are visiting upon the most vulnerable. Let's not only reunite those families, let's commit that we will never prosecute or incarcerate another family, another parent, another child seeking shelter and refuge and asylum in this country. Let's go to El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, and let's help the people there reduce violence, address drought, so they don't have to make that journey in the first place. Let's legalize those in America who are living in fear right now. Thank you for standing up for them. I'm grateful. Appreciate it.
I'm going to stand up for them a little bit more.
Please.
In 1980, my husband and I moved to Conroe, Texas. You know Conroe?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we were there with nothing. There was no work here. And I'll tell you what, to put a face to immigrants, the kindest people, Mexican, and they're talking about him. Their arms around me, and their tongues, and their love. Okay, we need to put a face to
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. You all probably know this, but immigrants coming from Mexico, asylum seekers who join us in this country, commit crimes at a far lower rate than do those who are born in this country. Are called here to do better for themselves and their kids, just like any of us are called to do better for ourselves and our kids. But the important thing, and this is why we are so lucky, and that's why if this is a problem, it's a great problem to have, they're also called to us and the idea of America, and they want to contribute to this, not take from it. And as you just said, they do that in ways that we can measure economically, in the safety of border and immigrant-rich communities like El Paso, but in ways that defy measurement and maybe even description. The kindness with which you were treated, the warmth that you were shown, yet legal and undocumented as well in this country. Just wanting to contribute and to give back, and are doing so far more than they're ever taking or even capable of taking from this country. We were in Mississippi recently. That state was the site of the single largest ICE raid in a workplace in this country's history. 700 people from Guatemala, a country that they cannot go back to because they will lose their lives and the lives of their children if they go back to, working in chicken processing plants in this country. Not the easiest, not the most glamorous, not the highest paying job in America, but doing that, frankly, because Americans born in this country are not doing that right now. Committing no crimes, posing no violence, no threat, raising U.S. citizen children, and more than 700 of them arrested, apprehended, many of them detained, some of them hogtied like you would an animal, striking terror into that community, and by extension, communities of immigrants all across the country. Imagine going to school as a U.S. citizen child, your parents undocumented, not knowing if you're going to see them at the end of the day, and feeling that every single day. We can do so much better than that. And again, as with so many issues we talked about, not only is it the right thing to do, but the ultimate beneficiary will not be that child or their parents or their family. It'll be all of us for the great things that they can contribute to the future of this country. So I'm with you. We're going to rewrite these immigration laws, do so in a way that is unapologetically proud of the immigrants who came to this country to call us home. So thank you for saying that. Appreciate it. I see you. Yeah.
How you doing?
Hey there.
I'm a veteran, and I'm a... Since I've been hearing you talk, I had like 3 different Second Amendment questions I was going to ask. But since everything's on illegal immigration, I just want to know what you're going to do for American children that are homeless. You mentioned 7 illegal immigrants have died. There's thousands of American children that are homeless living on the streets. What are you going to do about that?
Thank you for your service. Thank you for being here and for asking the question. And it gives us an opportunity to say, and this may be on the minds of many here, those 2 challenges and opportunities are not mutually exclusive. We don't have to take on one to the detriment of the other. You're absolutely right. It is unconscionable that we have hundreds of thousands of our fellow Americans on the street right now, hundreds of thousands of children who experience homelessness in the wealthiest country, the most vibrant economy for some, the largest economy on the planet, bar none. And yet too many people are on the outside, literally, looking in on this success, on this wealth, and on this greatness. Some of the things that we talked about today are connected to that. When you have a minimum wage that is a true living wage, you don't have to take on a second or third job. You're better able to provide for your kids, put a roof over your head, put food on the table. When healthcare is not a function of luck or privilege or circumstance, but something that you can depend on, you don't have medical bankruptcies that force people out onto the street. When we help those who've been abused by a spouse or a boyfriend or a girlfriend, I cannot tell you the number of homeless families I've met who became homeless in part because a parent, a spouse, was abusing someone. They reported them to police. That person is behind bars, but so is the principal breadwinner in that family. And families have to be on the streets 365 days before they qualify for aid and help, because now they are chronically homeless after being there for 1 year. So to the gentleman's point, let's invest in healthcare. Let's make sure that we have a living wage, and then let's be there for those who are on the streets. Let's create the housing units that we need, ensure that it is affordable, invest in their opportunity to be successful. Again, it's great for them. It'll be wonderful for all of us, for the things that they're now capable of doing, the contributions that they can make. So really appreciate you raising the profile of homeless children in this country. Thank you. Okay, I see it.
Hi, Beto. Glad to see you.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, is your use a complete sentence and coherent thoughts specific to electronic?
So, listen, my dad, who, along with me, took out loans so that I could go to college, who was so disappointed when he found out I was an English major. God rest his soul, he passed away in 2001, but wherever he is, I hope he recognizes that my ability to speak in complete sentences was in part thanks to his sacrifice, what he helped me to do in college. But listen, and Ryan's a great example of this. Let's reset the bar on public service and what leadership means and what it looks like. I was talking to Ryan earlier, and I'm just going to paraphrase what he said. But working in the minority, he's going to forge relationships with those across the aisle because he knows that he serves you and he's accountable to you, and that more than his political prospects or the polling or the next election, he wants to make sure that he can deliver. And this is a paraphrase, but he said, look, this should be about getting shit done in this country, right? So a focus on your constituents instead of your own political career or personal gain, that should be the new bar. Listening to one another as we are, including everyone in the conversation, not writing anybody off for any difference between us. Those aren't disqualifying or dangerous. Those are foundational to our success, our strength, our ability to excel as a country. And to operate on hope, that we invest in one another, to be ambitious and aspirational, to see the best days ahead instead of behind us, not walling ourselves off from the rest of the world or caging up kids or trying to make us afraid of one another. That's the way that we're going to serve. That's the way that we're going to run, and that's the way that we're going to deliver for our fellow Americans. So thank you. Appreciate it.
This is our last question.
Hi, Beto. I am a proud 15-year member of a union, and let's be real, unions are under attack right now.
Absolutely.
I want to know what you're going to do to protect and grow unions right now.
Thank you for the question. So connected to what I just learned in my visit to Erie so far today. I was talking about whether or not the community is producing enough of the skilled workforce. Here, I'm going to do this so I can see you. Hold that for me. Thank you. There you are. Hey. So, the anecdote that I related earlier, that Erie's having to import some of the talent and the skills that we need for jobs that we're creating right here, when all of you have invested in the K through 12 education of our kids, the quality of life that they enjoy, you've nurtured them, you want them to be competitive for those jobs. What I have learned is that unions are fundamental in our goal towards achieving this. Learning a skill or a trade, joining an apprenticeship, doing that absolutely debt-free, at no cost to the family, beyond the wages that are paid and the working conditions that they fight for, that makes Erie that much stronger, this community that much more competitive in attracting or retaining youth and talent here. Making sure that those who are home healthcare workers or who work at one of the hospitals here in this community or in this state are able to afford the care that they're providing and delivering for others. The only way that we're going to do this, and SEIU reminds us of this, is if they have the leverage of being able to organize and to bargain collectively to ensure that they are treated with the respect and the dignity that they are owed. So whether it's wages, whether it's the safety in the workplace, whether it is attracting talent, having the skills and the training and the apprenticeships that we need to elevate the role of unions in our country. It's going to make Erie and Pennsylvania and the United States that much stronger. Thank you for asking the question. So, Cynthia's telling me that is our last question, but we're going to hang out for a little bit for anyone who would like to take a picture or give me the opportunity to thank you in person and shake your hand. We're going to step outside. You all have done such an amazing job with the weather today. We want to enjoy that outside together. Thank you for having me out.